Okay, so this was good old days. Um, 2013, I had all these lenses. So I was a lens freak at that time. So I thought I'll talk about lenses because whatever information you want to get in lenses is which lens should I buy? What should I do with those lenses? But if you know the characteristic of each lens and what it does, then I think it's a much more informed decision to use the lens what you want. So these are all the lenses what you see in that picture. Quite a lot, about 19 lenses are there. The biggest I had at that time was a 300 mm f2.8. Later I purchased a 500 mm f4 and then sold everything and then went back to just few lenses and more primes. So what's the lens as such? Let's say basically, it refracts the light, not like prism, but it concentrates the light and then puts it on the sensor. So this is a crude diagram of a camera. This is a DSLR camera. In case of a mirrorless, one minute, let me go to the annotation. So in case if it is a mirrorless, you won't have this pentaprism, which is this thing, and there will be a LCD here. So normally the mirror is opened. So whatever you are seeing through the camera basically comes out into the lens. And so the lens is the most important part of every camera product. And then it goes through the pentaprism and then you see it. The image sensor is at the back of the camera. Now, when the mirror goes in, your view is blocked for a while, because as soon as the mirror goes up, the view gets blocked. So you get a blank for a moment, and then the mirror comes down. So at that time, what happens is the image is falling in the reverse fashion on the sensor. So the sensor really sees the image ulta. So now we all talk about lenses, 50 mm lenses, 25 mm lenses. So the lens length is really not the length of the lens. It's basically a focal length of the lens. So focal length is what is called a nodal point. The image gets concentrated into a single point, and from that point, it goes into the image sensor as a larger image, and it gets focused by your lens movement that I'll tell you how it is. So this is basically, if it is 50 mm, that is when we call this particular lens a 50 mm lens. So this is 25 mm lens. So the nodal point is here, and then you have a image sensor. So from image sensor, you get this particular length. And if you see your camera's viewfinder edge, you will see 1 0 with the vertical line. So that particular line is where the image sensor is actually located. So if you want to do a measurement, you have to take a measurement from that point, not from your viewfinder point. So let's see a 50 mm. 50 mm will be something like this. So from here to here, it will be 50 mm. Now, what about the zoom? The zoom lenses allow you to do a variable focal length. So what happens is when you pull the lens or push the lens or rotate the lens, it changes from 25 mm to 50 mm. I'm just giving a hypothetical lens, zoom lens, which is 25 to 50 mm. So the range is from the minimum to maximum of the movement. So it becomes 25 mm to 50 mm. Now remember, these lenses have got a lot of terminologies associated with it. So I'm just trying to put it in one frame. I'll explain each one of them in this picture only. I'm not going to talk technically a lot of stuff. So I'll answer all the chat questions later, because otherwise it will trouble my overall flow. So if you have any questions, you can just write it down, or you can later unmute yourself and ask me. So first thing, let's go from the top. Okay, this is 1855. This is a Canon, sorry, not Canon. This is OIS. That means it's Nikon. Not Nikon does a VR. Okay, optical image stabilization is what OIS stands for. Different companies have got different terminologies. IS is one. Then Nikon calls it VR. So this is basically an image stabilization marking. And this is a control for that. You can switch off the image stabilization. You can switch on the stabilization. What stabilization does is it has got a gyro inside the lens. So when your lens is handheld, obviously your hand shakes, and that shake is compensated by that mechanism which is inside the lens. Now, IS is useful, especially when you're trying to take a low light photograph handheld without a tripod. So usual rule of thumb is, let's say that you have a 50 mm lens. That means you can go handheld to 1/50th of a second, not slower than that. So the next comes this 1855. This is zoom lens. So it's 80 mm to 55 mm I can change. Whereas this one is a prime lens. A lot of people make a mistake, call this a block lens. Block lens is a wrong terminology. The block lens means if a lens is damaged and it's blocked, then it's called a block lens. But this is a prime lens and this is a zoom lens. There are only two types of lenses, prime or zoom. Prime cannot be changed. It is 50 mm fixed focal length, whereas the zoom can be changed from 18 mm to 55 mm. Now in the front, you have a filter thread where you can fit your different filters. Usually it is mentioned in the inside of the thread how much of filter thread is there. So if you're planning to buy a UV filter or a ND filter or a polarization filter, then you basically go for that particular filter thread to fit to that particular lens. Or better still, you buy the biggest filter available in the market, or if you have multiple lenses with multiple threads, go for say 82 mm, and then you get a step down rings which basically steps down from 82 to whatever 55 or 72. That ring will fit to the lens, and then for that ring you fit the filter. That's a sort of a shrewdest way of getting just one set of filters and allowing them to be used in all the lenses. Then you have lens hood, and this is the very, very essential one. See, when you buy a lens, usually the camera seller will also sell you a UV filter. In the present day digital camera, UV filter has absolutely no use, and they say that okay, it will protect the front of the lens by if there is a knock or something. But I feel a lens hood is a better choice than plastic lens hood is fine. Cheaper lenses don't really come with lens hood, so I would suggest go for a lens hood. There are third-party lens hoods available either from Chinese manufacturers. For every lens they have a lens hood, so ideally buy a good lens hood, but get a lens hood which is made for that particular lens and that particular fitting. Then you have focusing ring, which is in the front. In good old days, focusing ring used to be big and zoom ring used to be small. Now people zoom a lot, so zoom rings are bigger and focusing rings are smaller because most of the time these lenses autofocus. Then this is a marking which basically tells you which focal length you are in. So this is 18 mm to 55 mm. You can turn it on. And then you have the lens mount, and the lens mount is different for Canon. It's different. Nikon, it's different. So when you're buying a lens, you have to think of all this stuff. Then in some of the lenses, there is a transparent window which basically shows you the distance indicator as well as depth of field indicator. So the distance indicator shows, it's in the infinite marking or 20 feet or 5 meters. This is 15 feet or 3 meters and so on. And then it also tells you how much of depth of field, if you keep it at f11 from here to here will be the depth of field. So when you put the ring to whatever setting, you can visually make out, okay, this is from here to here, I'm getting a depth of field. So everything within that range is in focus. This is very useful, especially for a street photography, where you won't be putting the camera to your eye. You can just look at the lens information itself, and then you can click. Sorry. Now, there are a lot of characteristics for a lens, but I don't want to bore you. This is what I just covered right now. So then there is one more thing which is important, is this particular thing. It's usually mentioned that it is 1:4 into 5.6 and 1:1.4. What is that? It's pretty confusing for the first time, but once you know it, that's a maximum aperture your lens can open. For example, this lens, Nikon 50mm 1.4, can open up to 1.4. That's the widest aperture for this particular lens. The smallest is usually 22, f22, but the widest is what is important, because wider the aperture in a lens, the more light it can allow it to go into the sensor, and with that you can do a much better low light photography. Most of the zooms suffer from this particular problem. That is, they don't have a faster aperture. So we call these type of lenses fast lenses, because they have a aperture which allows you to do faster shutter speed in a lower light. That's why it's called a fast lens. Now, if you go into this 50mm range, in the 1855mm, you will get only about f5.6. So at 50mm, you can go only up to f5.6. You can't go to f4. You can't go to f2.8. You can't go to 2. You can't go to 1.8. You can't go to 1.4. For that, you need prime lenses. So usually prime lenses are better off as far as aperture is concerned. Now, focal length. I already mentioned what a focal length is. Basically, from the nodal point to the image sensor, it's a focal length. So 50mm lens, that's a focal length, and 400mm lens, that's a focal length. Nodal point can be anywhere. That depends on your particular lens construction. Now, there are two types of sensors we have. We have cropped sensors, which are smaller, and we have full frame sensors. And now the camera world, especially in the mirrorless field, is moving more and more towards full frame sensors, because for them it doesn't work out cost effective to have a cropped sensor, because already the prices of full frame sensors have come encroaching on the cropped sensor prices. Sony started it. Sony A7 Mark III was the one which broke that particular barrier of a full frame sensor, which is smaller. And now again Sony A7C, which has come almost the price of a crop frame sensor. So mirrorless basically is destroying this crop frame sensors, and more and more people are going to full frame sensors. Full frame means it's 35mm film size. So we have 36mm in this side and on the width, and 24mm in the height. So that's size of a 35mm film, whereas this is a 28mm sensor. This is the Nikon sensor, which is 1.5x crop. The Canon sensors are 1.6mm crop, 6x crop. They are slightly smaller than Nikon sensors. So what happens when you put a lens in these two cameras? See, what happens is the lens always puts an image which is circular. So the image is always circular, but we take photograph which is rectangular. So we are going to lose quite a lot of stuff which the lens has really captured, but we can't see it. Even through our viewfinder, we won't be able to see it, because viewfinder is made exactly for the size of your sensor. So it's a rectangle stuff what we are seeing. So even in full frame, we are losing quite a lot what lens really sees. Now, in a crop frame, what happens is, crop frame, since it's smaller than full frame, even though the image which is captured by your lens is bigger, you are able to capture only this smaller rectangle only. So that's why a crop frame will look like it is zoomed. So if you put the same lens on a full frame and a crop frame, for example, I'll give you an example here. So let's say I have 50 mm lens. So when I put 50 mm lens on a 43 mm sensor, that is a sensor of our full frame, I get a 40 degree focal angle. So that's the angle of view what I'm get is 40 degrees. Whereas if I put it in a crop sensor, I get a narrow angle of view, 27 degrees. And if I put it in a micro four thirds, which is still smaller, I get 20-degree angle. So this is almost double the size, see, 40 and 20. So this is exactly what we call as a crop factor. So when we multiply crop factor, so 27 is 1.5 times what we see. I'll give you a clearer picture in the next slide. So to get a same angle of view, on a full frame, you need to use 50 mm. On a crop frame, you need to use 35 mm. On a micro four thirds camera, like Panasonic and Olympus, you need to use 25 mm. So when you use that, your focal length is exactly same in all these three cameras. So there is an advantage going for crop bodies for people who wants a higher reach. So wildlifers, those who want to carry a smaller lens on a trekking, for them, the crop bodies are better. But the problem what happens is for them, the wide angle becomes skewed up. For example, the same focal length on a full frame can be in a 28 mm, but for a crop body, you need a 17 mm. And in case of a micro four thirds, you need something like 14 mm. But wildlifers, for example, you need to carry this bazooka 300 mm for a full frame, whereas you can carry a 200 mm and still get a 300 mm look in a crop body. And the Olympus and Panasonic, you just carry 150 mm. So you will get equivalent of 300 mm in these crop sensors. So there are thousands of lenses, different lenses. I'm not going to go into individual lenses. If you have any doubts and questions, you can ask me later in the chat. So the normal is similar to our human eye view. 47 degree is the human eye view. So 43 mm is equivalent to what we see normally. So that's what 50 mm is. So we call this as a normal lens. Anything above that is considered as a telephoto lens. Anything wider than that is called a wide angle or ultra wide angle lenses. So these are the primes and these are the zooms. So zoom has an advantage because it's versatile, it's smaller. You need to have multiple primes if you want to cover that same distance. And let's see how it really looks like. Now, angle of view really changes. Let's say we go into a full frame and then want to try take a photograph. So let's say there's a wide angle lens. So at about 11 mm, this is what I'm going to see. 1 minute. This is 11 mm lens. At 16 mm, this is how it's going to look like. At 24 mm, this is how it looks. At 35, this is how it looks. 50 mm, it looks like this. As I go into 100 mm, this is how it looks. 200, this is how it looks. 400, this is how it looks. And if you go into 800, this is going to go into this particular picture. Now, if you see my right hand side on the same slot, it shows 500 mm. That is because if it's a crop body, the same view what you see on a full frame body at 800 mm can be seen through a 500 mm lens. So this is how each one of those give you the particular effect. But I'll go back to one of the slides. You see this picture. This is taken in 400 mm. Compared to this, say a 50 mm, what's the difference what you see? Basically, the image looks deeper. So it basically is your perspective, how much you want to show. That's what really matters. So this is how each one of those lenses will really look like. Now coming to human eye, we always compare the lenses with the human eye, but it's a wrong comparison because human eyes see totally differently from that of how the lenses or camera sees. Our eye has got a overall 150-degree view. So when we see, we have a peripheral vision, we have a central vision, we have a retina which is curved, unlike film senses which are basically flat. So what we actually see is through the fovea, which is the strongest point, and this has got a lot of cells inside, and we can see something like a 2500 mm lens. We can see extremely small items, but only in the center. Then we have a 38 mm lens, which is basically the central retina. This is equivalent to our 50 mm lens because that's a 50-degree angle. And then we have a 5 mm lens, which is a wide angle lens. This is where we use both the eyes and we see a very wide angle view. But the clarity in these areas are not very good. That's only if somebody attacks you, you realize, okay, he's coming. So that's where that extreme angle is useful. Whereas camera has got only one angle of view, and it basically looks at one center of view, and it just wherever you focus, that's where it is. So that's why we call this as a normal lens or a standard lens. So when we look at using a normal lens or a 50 mm lens, this is how the view really represents. This is exactly how you see it. So when usual question is, why can't I get a wide angle lens, shoot everything? Because now I have 43 megapixel camera sensor. I can crop it wherever I want. So why can't I do that? So that question getting answered with this particular solution. You need different lenses to give a foreground to background perspective. Now this perspective is exactly what humans see. So that's why it's a normal lens view. So when you see a set of chairs, this is how it looks. And when you see this is not how a human eyes really look, because we don't have a blurred vision. We don't have a one area of focus. This is exclusive feature of a camera as well as a lens. By playing around with the aperture, using a wider aperture, you're going to give only one area in focus and the rest of the area blurred. Now, let's go into wide angle lenses. See how it looks. This is different from what humans see. That is why whenever you get a wide angle lenses, a lot of people have trouble trying to take a good photograph using wide angle lenses, because as humans we don't see in wide angle view. So wide angle, what happens is it distorts the picture to a certain extent. Whatever is in the foreground gets enlarged and whatever is in the background gets narrower. Now you have to exploit that particular feature to make a good wide angle image. So you have to have a good foreground element and then good background element so that you have a good wide angle view. Now, if you don't have a foreground element and you just give a background element and using a wide angle lens, then this is a 24 mm lens, then it will look pretty bad. So all the landscapers who use wide angle lenses try to have a foreground element only for that reason. That will give you the look of a wide angle lens. Now, if I crop this and remove this, the foreground stone, this will look flat. It doesn't give you the sense of depth. Then coming the ultra wide. Now we have 12 mm lenses available. I used to have this Laowa 12 mm, which is a fantastic lens. But unfortunately, it's very difficult to work in the field because you need to have a very prominent foreground. Only then you can exploit the use of that particular lens. But you can go in another way. That is, you make everything look flat. So this is how you remove that particular obstacle and just make lot of images put into one picture. So you can have 3 different doors, and then a lot of people who are moving around, and then it tells you a story. Once in a large canvas, it will tell you a story. So this is another way. Or you can exaggerate the staircases. So wide angle lenses, this is another use of that particular lens. Now, before I conclude, let me show you different lenses and their distortion and how to really use it. So 35 mm, this is how it looks. When I go to 28 mm, see how it looks. Go to 24 mm, go to 20 mm, and go to 17 mm. Let me come back just to make sure that you realize. 20, 24, 28, 35. Now, depending on your story, you tell whichever mm lens you want. So a lot of people like to have a zoom here because they can go to either 17 mm or 35 mm without changing the lens. So that's where the zoom really comes into picture. So it is not the lens which dictates your story. You have to dictate the story using that particular lens. So this is what is called a foreshortening, or exaggeration of a foreground element. And that tells a story totally differently. And lot of people use this particular characteristic of a lens to tell a totally different story. For example, a politician want to have a lot of people in a particular hall. All he needs to do is cram it together. So use a zoom lens. Or you want to have a particular hall look very wide. You are into sort of selling that particular room which looks very, very wide, even though it's a one single bedroom flat. Use a wide angle lens, then that particular room looks very spacious. So inside the lens, you have various elements which basically move, and there is one aperture blade which basically becomes smaller and larger. So on the top of the lens, you have these markings. So make sure that whatever you are going, you realize what it is. This is a 7200 Sigma lens. It can go maximum to up to 4 at 70 mm and 5.6 at 300 mm. It's a variable aperture lens, not a very nice lens, because what happens is variable aperture lenses are cheaper to produce. Whereas constant aperture lens, I'll give you an example, 70-200 f2.8. It is 2.8 at 70 and 2.8 even at 200 mm. So that is a fixed non-variable aperture lenses. So those are better lenses. So when you're buying a lens, it's not just the cost of the lens, the quality of the lenses basically differ from one another. Also look for these glass elements where you can see the markings as well as depth of field view. Especially look for lens distortion. This is the one which really makes a lens a good lens or a bad lens. There are 3 types of distortions which are possible: barrel distortion, which is like this; pincushion distortion, which is like this; and a moustache distortion, which is very difficult to correct it in post-processing. These 2 can be easily corrected using Lightroom lens profile, whereas the moustache distortion is difficult to do it. So I'll stop the share now. So if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, let me go through the chat, and if there is any, there are a lot of questions, I know. If you have questions, please write it in chat. I'll start from the top. Okay, Basavaraj has asked, do we really need NC filters? Neutral density filter, ND filter, I think he's talking about.
ND.
There is no NC filter.
Yeah, ND filter.
Sir, neutral density filters are useful when you want to cut down light. So it is useful for landscape photographers where you want a long shutter speed photography. Then it is also useful for wedding photographers where you want to take a photograph using a flash in a mid-afternoon sunlight. So ND filters and polarizing filters, these are the two filters which are essential filters for every photographer. I think those are the two filters you should go for. One of these days, I have already done a webinar on filters. I can give you a link. So filters are essential part, but don't waste money on UV filters. UV filters are utterly useless. I have plenty of them. Anybody wants, you can buy from me. Usually what happens is these sellers, usually they market you that UV filter telling that it will protect your front of the element. Usually it doesn't. The front glass of every lens is hardened glass, just like your mobile phone glasses. They are hardened glasses. They are scratch resistant to a certain extent. And even if there is a scratch in the front element, it doesn't affect your picture at all because your focusing is far away. So unless you are into a macro photography, unless your lens is a macro lens, you won't be able to see the front element at all in a lens. So if you have a scratch in the front element, don't worry. Scratch in the back element of the lens, that is much more important. So when you're buying a second-hand lens, look at the scratch in the back element. That is where the lens will fit into a mount. So that is, if it is scratched, then your lens is really troublesome. And a lot of people don't put a lens cap. See, the lens has got two caps. There is a cap at the end, back end, where you connect it to a camera. Then there is a lens cap at the front end. You can ignore the lens cap in the front end, but don't ignore the lens cap in the back end. Lot of dust goes into the back end of the lens, and that dust accumulates there, sits there, and that will make the lens look duller. Focus will look as though it's out of focus. I hope I have answered. If you want any other clarification, Basavaraj, you can ask.
Yes, once again, it's a neutral color filter, sir. NC filter.
Okay.
Neutral color filter.
NC filter. Neutral color filter. That is a earlier name for a neutral density filter. But neutral color and neutral density are exactly same filters. In film days, we used to use a lot of those different types of filters, but modern day, only filters which are required for you are neutral density filters, which basically cuts light without changing the color, and polarizing filters, which basically makes the sky look darker, makes the reflection inside the water look less reflective or more reflective, depending on how you want it. Which is a good macro lens you recommend for Nikon? Okay, if you want the best of the macro lens for Nikon, 105mm Nikon lens. Lens that is useful when we can't get close to the subject. This part I didn't understand. You mean to say you can't get, say, a feet away from the subject? Okay. See, remember, macro lenses are only for macro photography. They are not like telephoto lenses. There are telephoto lenses which are like the 100mm, all the bird photographers, what they carry, those bigger lenses. They are the ones where you can go closer to the subject, and they too can do a certain amount of macro, not macro in a true sense. They are close-up lenses. See, the close-up and macro differs into one main criteria. When somebody says macro, it is 1:1. That means you are making that particular image on the sensor, which is pretty large, so that something like older 1 rupee coin will fit into a full frame. So that is really a macro. If you are taking a butterfly filling the frame, or dragonfly filling the frame, that's a close-up lens. So if you have any doubt about what I'm explaining, you can ask question again, Ravindra.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. My question was just like when you have to take some insects and butterflies, etc. When we can't really get closer to the subject, how do we take that photograph?
Yes.
So it is not.
Yeah, that is a telephoto lens is better. Yeah, 300 mm lens is ideal for that particular this thing. Dragonflies 300 mm f4 lenses, 150 600, which is a very commonly used lens. You have Tamron, Sigma lenses. Those are excellent lenses. For a cheaper price, you can get lovely close-ups. In Nikon, you have 200 500. You have the new 300 mm FL series, which is excellent lens. 200 500 is excellent. So you can go for any one of them.
Thank you, sir. No, thank you so much.
Which lens do you prefer to indoor portrait of pictures and outdoor? Okay. 85 mm is a very good lens. F 1.8 is good enough. You need not go into F 1.2, 1.4, which are expensive. 1.8 will give you a very nice light effects, because even in the low light you can take it. So whether you're in a Canon or a Nikon, you have this 1.8 series of lenses in 85 mm. So, or if the hall is not big enough, then 50 mm is a better lens. 50 mm is probably the must-have lenses in everybody's pocket, because it's cheap. Both Canon, Nikon, any brand you take, 50 mm is the cheapest lens, because that's very easy to construct. Go for 1.8 version. No need to go for 1.4 and 1.2, because that will give you enough blur at f2 to 2.8. Remember one thing: when you buy a 1.8 lens, don't shoot at 1.8, because that's the bad point of any lens. The widest part of any lens is the bad. So you go one step lower than that. So 1.8, either 2.8 is the better one. F4 is excellent. Kishan, tell me. Hello? You can raise your hand also.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yogesh, tell me.
I just wanted to understand those extension tubes for macro lenses and how do they work.
Okay. Now, extension tubes and teleconverters, these are the two things which people get confused. Extension tubes are the ones which do not have any lens element within them. And teleconverters have got a magnifying lens element within them. So that's the difference between these two elements. Now, extension tubes are used basically in macro photography. What happens is, when you take the lens away from the body, the magnification power of that particular lens changes, because you can focus closer. Since you can focus closer, the subject is closer to the lens and it will look magnified. So there are extension tubes which are in various sizes. You put the extension tube to the body and then connect your lens to the extension tube. That's how the extension tube really works. So you have 10 mm, you have 14 mm, you have 25 mm. So you can add 10 mm first, then you can add 14 mm, so it becomes 24 mm. And then if you want still further away from the body, you can go into 25 mm to that particular combination. So it totally becomes about 56 mm. So as you take the lens away from the body, two things happen. One is your magnification increases, so you can go very close to the subject. This is one. The second thing what happens is the infinity focus gets lost. you won't be able to shoot something, say, far off. So this is exclusively for macro. So extension tubes only for macro. Now, people confuse with the teleconverters, which are basically like you take 100 mm and then 2x converter you put, it becomes a 200 mm. It's a magnifying sort of lens. So again, you take a teleconverter, connect it to your body, and then you connect the lens to the front of the teleconverter. So using a teleconverter, you can multiply that particular lens to a different focal length. Usually it is 1.4x in Canon, 1.7x in Nikon, and 2x. So 2x will multiply 2 times, and 1.4 or 1.7 will multiply it by 1 times. Now the drawback of these teleconverters is that they are specific to some of the lenses. All the lenses don't work with that. So they are only specific to few of the lenses, usually prime lenses. Zoom lenses, you can't connect a teleconverter. So before buying a teleconverter, you have to make sure that whether it is compatible with the lenses what you have. In Canon, only tele lenses like 300 mm, 400 mm, 500 mm, 600 mm, 800 mm, those are the ones which work with teleconverters. 70-200 doesn't work. 100 mm macro doesn't work. So there are so many rules and regulations before you buy for a teleconverter. I hope you got a fair idea, Yogesh?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. The next question is,
By
what is the use of a
polarizer?
Polarizer. Chandrakant Bhatt has asked, what is the use of a polarizer? Polarizer is an extremely useful filter. Basically, you use it to darken your skies. The blue of the sky will become darkened. If you have leaves, see, usually what happens is the leaves look shiny, and they have a oily coat. That shine reflects the light. So the leaves don't look exactly how your eyes sees it. So using polarizer filter, you can make the leaves look darker, greener with that particular polarizer filter. Basically, it's a filter similar to our polarizer glasses. Cuts a wavelength in particular direction. So as the wavelength of light in particular direction is cut off, reflections are coming from particular areas. So it doesn't affect all the reflections, just few of the reflections which are coming out are cut off. So you need to rotate this polarizer. There is a ring and you rotate the polarizer. At one particular time, you get a maximum polarization effect. And then other one, you get a totally no polarization effect. So you can use that to get, I'll give you another example of a use of a polarizer. Let's say that you're gone to a pond and you have fishes there. Your eyes can see the fish, but when you try to use a camera, what happens is the reflection on top of the water is the one what your camera sees. You won't be able to see through the water into the fishes. So that's where the polarizer filter, you add it, rotate the polarizer filter until from the viewfinder you can exactly see the fishes, and then you click. Then you don't see the reflection on top of the water, and you can go and shoot the depth of the water using these polarizers. So that's the advantage of polarizer. Tips to clean the lenses and protect from fungus. Okay. This is a very important part, especially if you live in an area like how I do in the coastal areas. You need to have what's called the dehumidifiers. Small type of dehumidifiers, you can do it yourself. Make a nice foam box, put a 15-watt bulb, those small bulbs. We call it 0 watt, but basically 0 watt is a 15-watt bulb. And constantly you make it run and keep your camera and equipments within that. So that heat what that bulb generates basically makes air drier, so protects the lens. Silica gel is another way. There are these color changing silica gels. So these gels, you can use them, and you can use that particular silica gel inside the box, airtight box. So you keep your camera and lenses in that. camera need not be kept because camera doesn't get a fungus. It's a lens which really gets a fungus. So whenever you go into a moist area after the rains, this applies even to those people in Bangalore. So 70 to 80% humidity is, as of now, yesterday, a day before yesterday, it's almost reached 100%. You had rains, so the humidity reached 100%. If constantly, if it is 70 to 80% humidity, your lenses also will get fungus. So the costlier way is to buy dehumidifiers. These are electronic devices. Basically, they suck out all the moisture inside the box. So within that, you keep the camera and just switch it on. It doesn't consume much of electricity, hardly about 1 kilowatt electricity per month. So that's a total consumption of a dehumidifier. So 1 unit, that's what it is. So you can buy those stuff. The cheapest one starts around 6,000, 7,000 rupees and goes up depending on the amount of equipments you want to pack into that. It comes in liter sizes, different liters. So start off with 30 liters and goes up to about 110 to 170 liters. What I have is a Sirui dehumidifier. If you go on Google and search for Sirui dehumidifier review, the only review what you get is my blog post, which is pretty famous. You can check it out, where I talk about these dehumidifiers and all different dehumidifiers, which one is good, which one is bad, what are the things to look for in a dehumidifier. So that's the best way of cleaning up. The second thing, which is most important, is after every shoot, when you come back home, use cleaning cloth. Microfiber cloths are the ones which can be used. See, these lens cleaning cloths are there. Those are the ones which are quite good. But before you clean, I suggest buy a shaving brush, new one. Don't use the one which you already used in the morning to shave yourself. So get a new shaving brush. Nylon one is better, not the animal hair one. The nylon brushes, and just dust out the lens, especially at the focusing ring and zoom ring. This is where dust gets in, and then slowly you will find that your zoom ring and your focusing ring will become gritty. So use a nylon brush and just brush it off. And those who want to buy something sophisticated, there are what are called as lens brushes which are available. But I prefer a larger size shaving brush. I exclusively keep it only for that. This is one. The second thing is buy what is called a rocket blower. Rocket blower looks like a rocket, and there's a small nozzle on top. That is the one which blows out air. So using air to blow out is the way to clean the front of the lens. Don't use your saliva. Don't blow it out on the lens, and don't use your handkerchief to clean the front of the lens. That will damage the lens coat which is there. So ideally use a blower. So blow the dust off. If there is sticky dust, for example, there is an oily stain, then what you do is you dip the microfiber cloth in a fresh clean water and just clean it off. Don't use alcohol to clean the front of the lens. That will damage the front of the lens, the coating of the lens. Then I think I covered most of, and especially if you go to a beach. For us, the coastal area is very close. We go to beach, the sand and salt, both are damaging to your camera as well as your lens. So make sure that as soon as you come back, clean up your lens. Don't make it wait for a few days so that the salt's corrosion action will start working on your camera. Clean it up as soon as possible. If already there is a spray of water, salt spray on the camera, make sure that you use a damp cloth and dilute it. So you take the salt out using a damp cloth. And remember, if your lens is not waterproof, you may have a water entering into the lens. The expensive lenses are waterproof lenses, but not so expensive lenses are not waterproof. So they are the ones which get damaged quite easily. So that's where the fungus comes in. So to avoid fungus, best is go for either dehumidifier, which is the most expensive solution, silica gels, which is the least expensive, but you have to keep on refreshing the silica gels. What you can do is you take a normal dosa tawa, just put the silica gel, heat it up, it will come back to a drier state. It changes color when it's wet and changes color when it's dry. So that way you can make out, it's dry or wet, and you can again put it back into that airtight container. So, but in a rainy season, you may have to do this silica gel drying up almost every week. So that's how you protect lenses. Otherwise, sooner or later, the fungus will start. Now, when the fungus starts, when there is an initial small dot of fungus, don't ignore, because if you leave it, even inside a dehumidifier, if you leave it and if you start using it, it will soon start growing in larger and larger. And it's impossible even for a service technician to really bring back the lens to an original state by cleaning it. So fungus is the one which destroys your lens. So make sure that fungus never grows for the first time. If it grows, either give it for service or sell it off as soon as possible. PF lenses, phase Fresnel lenses are very expensive. Is it worth buying it? Okay, the only advantage of PF lenses is basically they are smaller, they are easier to carry around on a telephoto stage. Is it worth buying? There are people who watch for that, telling that that it's sharper. I don't think they are really sharper lenses compared to actual lens element lenses, but they are easier and cheaper to carry it around. Can we get lenses with the aperture larger than 1.4? Yes, you can get lenses larger than 1.4. The Nikon is coming up with the lens which is 0.95. In the world, there are 0.9 lenses, 0.84 lenses have been made into this thing, but they're hugely expensive. For example, the nocturne lenses from Nikon will cost you about, I think about 5 lakhs for that lens. So these are not practically usable lenses. If you have money to put into these lenses, then it's worth it. Practically, you don't need these type of aperture lenses. When you go into that stage, like 0.95, if you try to focus on your eye, your eyelashes will be out of focus at that particular aperture range. So it's of no use practically. But anyway, they try to make it, and there's a huge demand. In fact, during the Corona period, there was a lot of purchase of these nocturnal lenses, a lot of bookings. I don't know why they want to buy it. Okay. What about Raynox? Which one is a better choice? Okay. Raynox is a magnifying glass which is placed in front of the lens. Unlike extension tube, which I mentioned, which is at the back of the lens, where you use it to magnify, this is at the front of the lens. It's basically a magnifying glass, just like your magnifying glass. So the advantage of Raynox, I have Raynox here itself, so I can show you what Raynox is. So basically this is Raynox, and this is a holder. So this holder is a sort of spring-loaded holder. So I can change it to whatever size of the front aperture of the ring of the lens and just fix it using this particular ring. What you see, can you see that spring mechanism? So that will hold the Raynox in the front of the lens. So this is how the lens element looks like. It's got a magnifying this thing. There are two versions available, 150 and 250. 150 is 4 times magnification, 250 is 8 times magnification. So this is very good for macro photography, where you can go around without adding that extension tube, because remember I mentioned in the extension tube, when you add an extension tube, infinity focus is out of question. So you can't focus on something which is far off. Say I'm shooting a butterfly very, very close. I want a magnifying component which is more than 1 times. So either I can go for the extension tube or I can go for the Raynox. So when I go for the extension tube, I can take that butterfly, absolutely no problem. But when I try to take a dragonfly flying far off immediately, I won't be able to do that. I have to remove the extension tube, reinsert the lens, and then I can take it. Whereas using Raynox, I can just pluck this off from the front of the lens and use it. So if you're in the budget for macro photography, you can use this on non-macro lenses. So your regular lenses like a 7200 or a 24-105, you can use this to the front of the lens. And using that, you can make that into a magnifying lens. So that's the advantage of the Raynox. So what are the other questions? Okay, you people can unmute yourself. Babu sir.
Yes, sir.
You can allow them to unmute.
Yeah, it's already done.
Yeah.
Sir. It's already.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to unmute and ask questions, because all the chat questions are over. Oh, okay, one more.
Yeah.
Can I have a Raynox on a zoom lens like 18-140? You should be able to. The only restriction is the size of this adapter. If you are able to fit the adapter, I think the maximum it can go up to is 62 mm. So if I can go up to 62 mm, you should be able to fit it into the. You can just check the Raynox website basically to check whether the front of your lens filter diameter is equivalent. Even if filter diameter is not equivalent, you can get a step down rings and then you can use them.
Sir, this is Satyaprakash here.
Yeah, tell me, sir.
Sir, I'm a doctor. I usually
Sure.
be traveler. I just need 2 lenses to buy. One for an indoor photography, family, friends, flowers, pots and other things. One for a landscape outside. Which one you recommend,
Okay.
sir?
So which camera do you have?
I have
Like
a
Nikon, Canon?
Yeah, Nikon.
Okay.
Nikon
Full frame, right?
D90. It's a gold one.
Okay, D90. It's a crop frame camera.
18-1.
So yes. So for indoor, you can use 35mm lens, which works out perfectly fine. You can get 35mm 1.4 if you want a prime lens, or you can go for one of the zoom ranges, depending on how you want it. Like you can get, I think I'm a Canon guy, so I don't know exactly which are the Nikon ranges, but around 16, 24 to.
You can tell Canon also. I have a Canon D90 also.
Okay, Canon D90. Okay. You have 18-135.
Yes.
Which came with the kit lens of a D90.
Yes, Nikon.
That is perfectly fine for your indoor photography.
Okay.
See, the only drawback there is the maximum aperture, which is f3.5.
Yes.
So at 18mm, it can go only up to 3.5. So that is where either going for a 50mm 1.8 or a 35mm 1.4. These are the ones which allow you to do a low light photography.
Yes.
In case indoor, say if there is a party going on, birthday party where they don't put brilliant lights, just a normal light, and you want to capture that in a natural light rather than using a flash. See what happens when you use a flash indoor, unless you are good in using a flash, everything becomes flat.
True.
So on camera flash really makes things look pretty fat. So it is better to go for a natural light when you are not sure of how to use your light effectively. And that is where you can go for these lenses which are wider aperture, and you can capture those. And the same lens can also be used outside for a travel,
Okay.
for a landscape. So you need not have the same lens, only for indoor and outdoor. 35mm is an excellent landscape lens, street lens, travel lens, low light photography lens. Say late evening after sunset, you want to have cityscape photography. 35mm or a 24mm is absolutely a beautiful lens. So you can choose one of them. And then you, suppose you want to have a travel lens which is having a larger scope of zoom range. So you want to concentrate something, 70-200 is the ideal lens for that sort of purpose. 70, and one more thing is, if you just want to buy one lens for both the purposes, you can go for 70-200 2.8. It's available, it's expensive lens, and as doctors we can afford it. So you can go for 70-200, which is an excellent lens for indoor as well as function photography. I use it especially if you're taking some drama or some functions which are going on. You can sit somewhere in third or fourth row, still you can zoom in at 200 mm. And since it's 2.8, most of the actions, even in a low light drama, can be captured. And the same thing can go as a good travel lens.
I see. Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome. Any other questions? You can unmute and ask me.
So Shahjin has posted, a person migrating from Canon to Sony, but written lens can be used on Sony body with the metabones. Will it affect the quality lenses like 1655 or 85 mm?
Okay. This is what I did when I shifted from Canon to Sony. So I had a lot of Canon lenses, and I had a Canon body 5D Mark IV. I sold Canon 5D Mark IV and went for Sony A7R3. So that is when I wanted to use the same Canon lenses. I got a Metabone converter, and using Metabone, all your lenses work perfectly fine. Initially, they had some firmware issues. They later came up with the better firmware. Once the firmware is installed, it will work quite good. I won't say 100% it will work exactly like the Canon body. But because your Sony body is quite good as far as focusing is concerned, and in-body stabilization is there, and that really works along with these Canon lenses. So when you go into mirrorless, one of the advantages what you get is in-body stabilization. Whether it's Canon, Sony, Nikon, any one of them, you have in-body sensor-based stabilization, and that stabilization really works. So initially, I would suggest anybody who want to move into from one Canon to a sort of Sony, it won't work with Canon to Nikon. You can go for either Metabones or Sigma M11. I think it's M11. Some 11 is the number. So Sigma adapters are there. So Sigma or Metabone, both are fine. I prefer Metabone because it's a metal construction, one thing. It's got much better compatibility with more of a Canon lenses than Sigma, which is more made for Sigma only, and it is not so compatible with the Canon lenses. So initially, you can easily shift to any of the EF lenses from Canon to Sony, just changing the body using Metabone converter. Metabones is a little expensive, but I think in the second-hand market, you will get quite a lot of Metabones now.
One more question from Mr. Michael. Use of the tilt shift lenses.
Okay, tilt shift lenses are exclusive lenses. These are basically used by architectural photography first, as well as those photographers who want to give that sort of toy effect. The basic idea of tilt shift lenses, I had two tilt shift lenses when I was in Canon. I had a 17 mm and I had a 90 mm. So both these basically allow you to get a larger depth of field by tilting and shifting. So these tilt shift lenses exclusively for architectural photography. So if you are into architecture, buy it. That is, if you are seriously into architecture, because nowadays you can do a focus stacking and get both the front element as well as the backmost element. That is one. The second thing, the lens corrections. See, usually what happens is when you take an architectural photograph, your buildings will start leaning like this. So that leaning building will not be appreciated by an architect. So for him, the building should look straight, not like a leaning tower of Pisa. So what he will prefer is straight line. So those people are specific about tilt shift lenses, but nowadays most of the software, for example, Lightroom can correct it, Photoshop can correct it in Camera Raw, so you can easily correct all that tilt and shift. So now going for tilt and shift, unless you are a hardcore architectural photographer, it's not worth it. There's a question on second-hand market. How do you reach second-hand market? Okay. On Facebook, there are second-hand markets. You have Bangalore buy and sell. You have Camera buy and sell. There are so many people who are selling, especially now after Corona. Lot of IT guys who basically had all those big white lenses are trying to sell them. So this is the best time to buy second-hand lenses. And don't worry, you have to check lenses. It's just like buying a second-hand car. Most of the lenses I have purchased in my life are second-hand lenses. I hardly went for a newer lens because one thing is you will get at half the price. And if you know exactly how the lens really is, and look for front element, look for the back element, look for marks where whether it's repaired, look for the fungus, and look for scratches and damages. And if you know the person who is selling, then you can be sure. JJ Mehta is another site where there is a very good second-hand market. Those people are little reliable, and they have a policy where they really go into, you have to put a photograph with your signature, with the serial number, with your name, along with each of the photographs, so that you don't take a good photograph somewhere from the internet and then put it as your lens or a particular thing. It's more like OLX, but it's much more reliable. I would prefer buying from these markets as compared to OLX, where cheating is much more. But take caution, inspect the lens, only then you buy it. Don't buy online. Don't buy because somebody says it's good. If somebody is in a place where you can't reach, ask some photographers to go and check it out, and then get a feedback, and only then you decide. So that's second-hand lenses. Any other questions? You can unmute and ask. Before I conclude, hey, if there is any question related to this or related to something else, you can ask now.
If the webinar is going on, the webinars ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ we are going for a 8 weeks or a full package in a particular subject. So if somebody wants to join only for some 2-3 classes, is possible, or they are supposed to come?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible, but they will lose the track. For example, in a series of such a seminar, such webinars, what I'm planning to do is I'm not going to tell the basic again somewhere in the second or third webinar. So I think it's preferable if they manage to come up with a whole series, or I can always give them a recording, because I'll be doing the recording of these seminars.
Yeah.
So in case they have missed some of the webinars, I can give them a recording so they can go through the recording first, and then they can come back to the regular webinars, or they can join the webinar first, and if they don't understand, they can go back to the older webinars. And if it is a paid webinar, I'm going to give them a recording. I'm going to give them individual recordings of each of the webinars, because what really happens is, even if you are very attentive, as the flow is quite fast, you tend to lose track, or you want to go back and see again what I was showing, especially in these practical webinars where I'm showing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I also plan to share with them the material what I'm using. So for example, if I'm doing a Lightroom webinar, I'll give them my sample files, so they can work on that, looking at my recording, and also they can again revise several times. So that's the whole idea I'm planning.
Yeah, the planning of this question was last time when we had a webinar, we had a question by that singular person is asking about only for developing module, not for the library module.
Correct.
So by that time, we insisted him to come and join for the particular sessions.
Yes.
So
Correct.
one more question is there in a chat box, sir. I have a Nikon D700.
Oh, yeah.
Pictures are captured at very sharp. It's not very sharp and clear at ISO 500 and above. Is it due to the kit lens or the camera capacity?
I don't think it's a camera capacity. No camera as of now. See, one thing is people say that some cameras are good, some cameras are bad. In fact, for manufacturers, it's very difficult to manufacture a bad camera. As of now, every camera is excellent. It's only a slightly better or less. Other than that, it's excellent. So you can go for even the cheapest camera available in the market and still you get the good results. The lens, what makes a difference? So lens can be autofocus. See, there are a few things which I didn't cover in this because it is really advanced stuff. You can do autofocus adjustment, micro autofocus adjustments. And this is only for DSLR. If you have a mirrorless, you don't have to bother about it. The reason is, let me explain it in a very simple way. When you're using a lens, the lens is passing through your mirror and then goes to the pentaprism, and then you are looking through the viewfinder. You focus looking through the viewfinder and then you try to focus. When the mirror closes, the lens will be sending the same signal into the sensor. So ideally, manufacturer has to make sure that your viewfinder and your sensor are in the exact plane. So whatever your viewfinder saw as fully focused should also be focusing on the sensor. Many a times it doesn't happen, because what happens is your lens mount would have got loosened. So when the lens mount is loose, when it fits into the camera, it is not tightly fitting, slightly it has come forward or backward. So then the calculation what manufacturer did goes totally haywire. So there is a micro focus adjustment in some advanced cameras, not all cameras. Some advanced cameras have got micro focus adjustment. I can take one webinar exactly how to do for both Canon, Nikon, and all other things. But this problem is solved in mirrorless. So when you have a mirrorless, you are exactly seeing what your sensor is seeing. You don't have a viewfinder. So your focus is accurate all the time. So the micro focus adjustment is not required for a mirrorless, but it is required for the DSLRs. So I have a feeling, I think servicing should give a particular thing. Both the lens may be faulty. It might have fallen off the focus. One of the elements might be off axis. So that may be the cause. But I'm not sure why it's clear at ISO 500 and above and why it's not below. That I can't explain. It's not logical enough. But I have a feeling that service should repair that. I think it's nothing to do with the camera capacity. Now, one more thing, when you give a service, make sure to give it for somebody who's authorized service center rather than giving for somebody who is doing it as a hand job. Shajin, once a week, weekend would be good enough. The problem is Saturday, Sunday, a lot of webinars are going on. Now with the corona, everybody is into webinars. So I used to do it on a Saturday, 7 p.m. But problem what has happened is a lot of webinars really clash into that. So probably the next poll I should have done is which day is better. I'm planning to do it in a weekday so that a lot of people will be freer during that time. Wednesday or Thursday is preferable. I did a poll in my group and a lot of people said weekdays are better because they already have a lot of other webinars which they need to attend. A lot of wildlife groups have Saturday webinars, and lot of very popular photographers do webinar during weekends and Sundays. So I think I have to think about it exactly which day is better. Depending on your choice, like please write to me. You can always contact me on my WhatsApp. That's my, sorry, I'll send it to everybody. This is my WhatsApp number. and you want to mail, you can mail me at drkrishi@gmail.com.
One more question is there, sir, from Ms.
Yeah, one
Radhika.
more question is there. Yeah. I have a Canon 600D. The pictures are not so clear. I have two lenses, 1855 and 24mm. How to capture good picture at the same? One thing is, if they are not clear, look for one thing, which is autofocus. So autofocus may not be really doing focusing properly. Try to go into manual focus and then focus to the eye. This is one. The second thing is, you may be going at the widest aperture. So try to put f8 as your standard aperture just to test. I'm not talking about f8 is the good aperture for all the pictures. If you want a background to go blur, you can go for whatever the widest aperture is there, like 5.6 f4 or something, which is there in the 1855. 24mm, I think you have a still wider aperture. I think, I don't know, 24mm, I think it's 1.8 lens or 1.4 lens. But anyway, try to put it at f8 and see whether you get a sharper picture. If you don't get a sharper picture at f8, then your focusing is not accurate. Ideally, focus to the eye. So once you focus to the eye, there is some amount of area in front of the eye and some amount of area behind the eye, behind the body are in focus. So they should come in focus correctly. So that's the whole idea. So any other questions?
No, sir. Mr. Venkatesh said that Thursdays are good.
Yeah, Thursdays are good. Yes. That's why I chose Thursday this time. So let's decide on which day it is. And I'm also going to send you, all of you, some messages, especially what are the webinars which are available, the details, when it will be available. So if you are if you want more communication from me, because as of now I'm only posting in 3 forums, that is the Creative Focus Forum, TGIS Forum, and Professional Photographers Forum, Creative Photographers Forum. So only these 3 forums. So if you want to add to my discussion list, you can always message me through WhatsApp. So WhatsApp, we have a group called Creative Focus WhatsApp group. Facebook, you can always ping me or email me, or you can send messages to my phone. So any one of these methods, you can really contact me. So that way you'll get all the future updates as and when it comes. I think we'll call it a day. I think it's almost 1.5 hours.